So we're going to start off with our ingredients, make sure we have everything we need. We have some bread flour, just Pillsbury. It's bleached, but it's all you can get. Honey, I've got a cup of warm water, a cup of warm milk. I just popped that in the microwave for a minute just to warm it up. 2 teaspoons of salt, and 2.5 teaspoons of yeast. This is instant yeast. We're going to start off with a yeast mixture. I have a cup of warm water, about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to add approximately 2 tablespoons of honey. Doesn't have to be exact. We're not going for anything special here as far as flavor. This is really just to make sure that the yeast is alive and healthy before we start making our bread. It will help to add some flavor. So we'll just mix that in real good with the fork. Then we're going to take our yeast mixture, and you can stir this in or you can just sprinkle it across the top here nice and evenly. And these are just little husks with bacteria cultures inside, and those will just dissolve on their own here in the next 10 to 20 minutes. And it'll start to build a frothy head like beer. So we're just going to set that aside and wait for it to kind of do its thing. All right, in the meantime, we have a cup of milk. I stuck it in the microwave for about a minute, just to kind of warm it up. And it's just not cool from the fridge. So it's fine. It's no big deal. You don't even have to warm it up if you don't want. To that, I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. And the main reason we want to add the salt into the milk at this point, we want to keep it away from our yeast mixture and make sure that it's going to be diluted somewhat, because salt will kind of prevent that bacteria from growing. So while we're waiting on the yeast mixture, we can start hydrating some of our flour with the milk. So we'll take that salty milk mixture, put it in our KitchenAid mixer with the dough hook on it, and we'll just start adding maybe 1.5 cups, 2 cups of flour, just to kind of get that going. So this is a 1/2 cup measuring cup here, and we'll just start off with, let's start off with 1.5 cups. It doesn't have to be exact, because we're going to go more about how the dough looks and feels rather than how what our measurements are. So let's just start that mixing there. Alright, we're just going to let that kind of come together. See if you can see it better from this angle. If you need to scrape down the sides, that's fine. Oh, we don't want to go too crazy, it'll splash out the sides. There we go. So it's kind of formed a very loose, kind of shaggy looking watery dough. We'll just kind of leave it while the yeast is doing its thing here. So as you can see, our yeast is looking like it's coming together nicely. We're going to go ahead and wait. It started to form a little bit of a frothy head there, you can see, but you can also see that there's some dry yeast on top, and we're just going to let that sit and do its thing for, we're not going to have to wait too long on this. I think maybe another, 7 minutes or so should probably do it. So we'll leave that for just a little while, and I'll be back shortly to finish making this dough. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes or so, and as you can see, is bubbled up nicely. It's got a nice big layer of foam on it there. I have a little bit of dry yeast up top, but you know, we're not going to worry too much about that. We know that it's alive and it's well and it's going to do a good job. So we are going to go ahead and pour that right in. Let me just make some room here, get that out of the way. All right, we're just going to dump that in there. There we go. And we'll add some more flour, probably about another cup and a half or so. Now at this point, we want the dough to be wet. We want to try to avoid it from drying out, because adding liquid at this point is going to be a little bit more difficult than just adding more flour. So we'll just kind of let that incorporate there just on low. We're just going to let it mix. You might have to bump the switch just a little bit to keep it from causing a huge mess at first. There we go. Okay, now it's forming a nice shagginess, and that'll incorporate here real soon. Now, as soon as all the dry flour gets kind of incorporated in there, I'm going to turn the speed up, and I'm going to turn it up quite a bit, probably all the way to high for most of the time, just to help with the gluten formation and to incorporate all the ingredients together. So let's see here. All right. I think everything's about as incorporated as it's going to get down the bottom. So now we're going to turn on high, and it's going to start kind of cleaning the sides of our bowl a little bit. And I may add more flour as we go, but we don't want to add too much at this point. We want it to look like a wet dough. Alright, now when it's on high, I can tell, and you can tell when you lift up the hook, all the dough is just kind of falling off. It's a little bit too wet right now. So, this is a half cup measuring cup, so I'm going to add about 1/4 cup. And as we get closer, I'll only add about a tablespoon or so at a time until we get to the right consistency. So, again, with incorporating flour, we're going to bump that start switch just a little bit so that it doesn't shoot up out of the bowl. We'll just kind of ease it in there just so we don't make a mess. Okay. And we'll let all the dry flour kind of get soaked up into there. And then we'll turn it on high again. And when we turn it on high, that is really your kneading part of the process with your stand mixer. It's really helping to stretch out some of those gluten proteins and allow them to kind of come together. Okay, so here we go. We're going to turn on high again. Okay, so that's looking a lot better. That's about what we want. Notice how when I pull up, the dough really wants to cling onto that hook, and also when it's on high and going around, it's not splashing as much. It's really just more sticking together and wanting to come apart. You know, like something really sticky on your finger, right? It just kind of wants to stretch instead of just break or splash. So I guess it's a good time to explain maybe what we're trying to do with gluten. So your gluten protein in the wheat is going to be like a string that's kind of all balled up like this, you know, and we're adding a lot of these balls together in our mixture, right? So these are like within the little granules of flour, and then when we put them in water, they loosen up and they kind of become like stringy, you know, like this. So, and then whenever we knead it together, these things are getting mixed and tangled and all that, and you know, millions of these guys are getting tangled up kind of like rope, and they're getting stringy and stretchy, and they form this bond that really sticks together. And when you incorporate that, and then you have your yeast that is also eating some of the starches, and then off-gassing, whenever the CO2 is off-gassed from the yeast multiplying, it's going to create an air bubble, but this stretchy stuff is not going to let it escape, so that's what gives you that nice, holy, open crumb bread look. So that's what we're after. We're after this gluten formation that's really sticky and stretchy and going to trap all the air from the yeast. So what we're going to do now is, if I can get that off my finger, there we go. So what we're going to do now is we are going to let this KitchenAid run on high for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to see what it looks like. I may stop it in the middle and add a little bit more flour if it's just not coming together, but we can first see that it's coming together, because stuff will stick to the side, but then it will form these really stringy pieces of dough as it's mixing around really quickly. So, you know, as it sticks to the side, it'll kind of pull and stretch, and eventually the dough will all want to stick to itself, and it'll clean the sides of the bowl pretty well. All right, so let's continue, and we'll kind of look and see how this goes. So I'll kind of do this in another segment here. Okay, so we're gonna put our dough hook back down in here, and I'm gonna go ahead and lock the top of the thing so that it's nice and sturdy, okay? And then I'm gonna turn it back on high, and then I'll kind of get behind the camera and try to focus it in on what I'm doing here, so you can have a really good visual of what's going on, okay? I'm also gonna have to hold on to the mixer, because especially as that dough comes together, it is really gonna wanna start rocking. So toward the end especially, you'll have to be here and holding on to it, but it's only like for 5 minutes, and it beats doing it by hand, so we'll be fine. All right, here we go. All right, I'm gonna slow it down here for a minute, because I want you to see how it kind of is sticking to the sides a little bit more at this point than it is to the hook, and that's okay. We're gonna keep on going, all right? And it's only been maybe 2.5 minutes, so we'll keep on. I'm gonna turn it back on high, and we'll keep going, and we'll see how the gluten forms from here. It should start peeling off of the sides and sticking to the dough on the hook at this point. All right, and then if it's still not wanting to clean the bowl off good enough, that's when we're going to start adding more flour, about a tablespoon at a time. All right, so here we go, high again. that has been about 5 minutes. And you can see the sides of our bowls are significantly more clean than they were. But it's a little wetter than I'd like. If I stick my finger to it, it really wants to stick to my finger, and it kind of pulls it off the thing. Plus, our dough is really drooping down. I want to add a little bit more flour to that. Not too much more. I'm just going to add maybe about a tablespoon of flour or so. I'm just going to guess it. This is going to be a rough estimate. We've got a little bit of dough on there. There we go. All right, and of course we're going to incorporate that carefully. Okay, so now that that is nice and mixed in there, we are gonna try to get this back up to high again. And of course, now you're really gonna have to hold on to. You'll notice that your mixer is really gonna start bouncing around, and these sides should be getting even more clean because the dough is drying up a little, and it's not quite as wet and loose and sloppy. So it really should try to clean up those sides, not all the way up here where the dough doesn't really slap around too much, but especially toward the bottom. And my goal at this point is to get it to where it kind of like when you look down into the bowl, it looks like it is not attached to the bowl at the bottom. So we'll see if this gets us there. Okay, let's see if that can help you see a little bit better on what's going on. Let's see. Okay, here we go. All right, so notice how there's still a decent patch stuck to the bottom, even though the dough is really clinging to our hook right now. That's really good, but I'm gonna add another tablespoon of flour, and I want to see the dough come off of the bottom of that bowl. That is kind of a nice indication to me that the dough is just at the right amount of I don't know, wetness. So let's incorporate that carefully just by bumping our switch again, and then we'll crank it back up to high and see what it looks like. Okay, here we go. All right, so hopefully you can see down in the bottom there where it looked like, most of the dough was actually coming off of the bowl and staying on the thing. Now, it's not going to stay that way. When you shut it off, it's going to go to the bottom and it's going to stick to the bowl, as you can see. But a lot of the dough is going to want to stick together here. And it's going to want to cling to the hook and to the bowl. So we might actually have to slide it off the hook because we have so much gluten development that it doesn't want to break. So look, we'll have to actually get it up and get it over that hook, because there's so much gluten there. That's great. That's one way we know that we've formed a lot of gluten. Now, it is a bit sticky, but since this is going into a loaf pan and we're not going to try to shape loaves by hand, I'm okay with that. Okay, so I will also try to show you another way to tell if your gluten has formed right. So I'm going to pause this and I'll be right back, and I'll show you the what do they call it? Window pane test, I think. So we'll show you that here. Okay, we're out here and we're staring out the window because we're gonna do a window pane test. Now I've got some of the dough right here, and the idea behind the window pane test is that you can stretch it so thin that you can see through it without it tearing. Let's see here. Oops. Alright, so now it's tearing a little bit, but you can see where we can see. Well, we're tearing before we can see daylight. Maybe we need to knead that a little bit more. So I'm going to throw this back in there and we'll get to kneading some more and build up that gluten. Okay, so the window pane test didn't look as good as I would have liked. We're getting there though. I think rather than just knead, it was a little stickier than I would have liked. Took a little bit to get it off my hands, so I'm going to add a little bit more flour. Ooh, probably not all this, maybe just a tablespoon, a light tablespoon. There, so that'll just keep it from sticking to me so much. It won't make it so wet, so we'll do that and we'll incorporate that and we'll knead it a little bit more and see if we can't get that super stretchiness that allows you to actually see light through it. So let's go ahead and do that. Bump our switch again so that we're not making a mess. Okay, here we go. Alright, so we let it go for about another 2 minutes or so. Let's see here. Again, it's really want to stick to that hook and loop around that. That's great. That's a good sign. So we almost have to like take it and scoop it off of that hook. So now, let's see if we can pinch off some of this. And let's see if I can come around here. Let's see if we can see it through this time. No, it's really wanting to break apart before we can get a good translucent look through it. It's getting there. You can see on the right hand side where you can see some light through it. Maybe hard to tell on camera. So let's toss that back in there and we'll let it go for a little bit longer. I don't think I'm going to add more flour at this point. This is a nice consistency, especially for a loaf pan, because the moisture is going to allow it to really, puff up and be crusty, because when you stick it in the oven, the water in there is going to want to get hot and steam out, and it's going to get a nice rise out of it when you put it in the oven. Okay, got my hands cleaned up a little bit. Let's lock that down and we'll turn it back on and see what we can do here. Okay, I'll let that go a couple minutes, and scoop that off of there. I'll pinch off a chunk and we'll see if we can do the window pane test again. Okay, let's see if we can do this window pane test. There we go. So you can see light through the dough before it starts ripping. Now we've got Nice, good gluten development there. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. So you can really start to see light through it before it tears. So that's great. That's what we wanted. What that'll allow us to do in sandwich bread is it'll allow us to slice our bread slices fairly thin and still have a good sturdy bread for eating our sandwich. So that's great. That's what we want. Okay, so now we have kneaded this dough pretty well in this bowl, and you may be having trouble like getting the thing off there. It really likes to stick. So one thing you can do is grab your mixer and kind of just smack the side of it.
Gotta beat it like the dickens.
There you go. You gotta beat it like the dickens. And now you should just be able to pop that right off there. So there's that. All right, and then we'll take, I like to take another bowl. You could take the dough out and spray this, but it's kind of fiddly, so I'm just gonna take some spray olive oil, or you can just use regular olive oil. I'm gonna spray my little spatula to help me get the dough out. I like to do it over the bowl, so then the overspray just helps get that bowl going. All right, a nice even coat, maybe a little extra on the bottom because we're gonna put the dough in there and then flip it over. All right, and then we will take this and scoop it right into here. So now that we have that in here, we can get a little bit of oil on our hands because I'm going to want to just kind of fold this over and ball it up. So we'll grab the edge and fold, and fold, and fold. And you can see how it's looking real smooth right there. There, so I'll fold the 4 edges in kind of, and then I'll flip it over. Flip it over, and boom. Now we have a nice oiled top right there. You know, and all the folding will just help, you know, form that gluten even more. So I need to cover it now. If you don't cover it, it ends up getting a skin over the top. You don't want that. So we'll just get a nice piece of plastic. You can also cover it with a wet dishcloth. Works just fine. I'm going to use the plastic. I think it seals a little bit better. I'm going to spray it with a little bit of olive oil. Oh, that's gathering up on me naturally. There we go. All right. And we'll get that sealed real nicely. Okay. Here we go. So we're going to let that rise. Typically about an hour, 45 minutes in the summertime. You know, it's nice and hot. We keep our house kind of cool around the 66, 65 degree mark. So we might have to let this sit 2 hours, and that's fine. Now, to get even more flavor, you can put it in the fridge and let it sit overnight. You will want to pull it out and let it come back up to room temperature before you do your division, but a nice fridge fermentation is really nice, especially in like English muffins and rolls and stuff like that. Since this is just going to be sandwich bread and I'd like to get this video to you quickly, I'm just going to let it sit on the counter. Okay, back, and our dough has doubled in size. Alright, I just had that little holding in some heat there, and we'll peel this back. Okay. Looking pretty good there. So we are just going to turn that out onto a lightly floured surface. I'm going to just take some all-purpose flour here and just lightly sprinkle that down there. This should be enough to make 2 loaves. So let's just dig that out. And I'm not really smashing it down. I'm just kind of peeling it away from the sides. And you see we got some big bubbles in there, and the big ones we can just pinch those and pop them. All right, we don't need that big of a bubble because then all your whatever you want to put on your sandwich is going to fall out. All right, so we'll just dump that over onto our surface. We'll take a little bit of flour and just sprinkle it on that. Maybe a little bit more. Okay. There's that. Now we'll kind of fold it up just like we did when we put it in the bowl. Right, we'll just fold it up and that'll help kind of bring everything together in more of a ball. There we go. Okay. Let's bring some of our flour in there. There. Alright, there's a nice light looking dough. Okay. We're going to bring a kitchen scale. You don't have to do this. You can just cut it in half, but I want to know what our weight is so I can divide it by weight in half. So I'll take our bowl that we had it proofed in. I'll just turn on my kitchen scale so that it zeroes out the weight of the bowl. I'm going to stick this back in our proofing bowl. Okay, so we have looks like 1,112 kilograms. So that would be what? 556. Hope I did that right. If not, not a big deal. It's close enough. All right, so I'll just cut that in half as close as I can. All right, and let's see how close we can get. 552. I'll take it. It's close enough for me. I'm not going to worry about a couple grams. It's not a problem. Okay. So you can see I got really close without even doing the kitchen scale, so it's not necessary. But it keeps you from having like one big loaf and one tiny loaf. Alright, I'll kind of fold those individually a little bit to form like a nice big ball. And doing this and kind of tucking the bottom up and in like this with your thumb is really going to help stretch the top and help get a nice big rise. So we'll kind of do that, and then we can kind of roll it just a little bit. Now if it's sticking too much, you can add a little bit of flour, but we're going to roll it out to more like a log type shape so that when we set it in the pan, it goes from edge to edge on the bottom. There we go. And then if you have a surface that you don't really like, it's got a lot of bubbles on top, you can kind of push it down like that and then fold, which stretches the outside and makes it nice and smooth. All right, and then you can fold again. And it looks like it's sticking to the surface just a little bit and making that top surface a little bit rough. So let's just sprinkle a little bit more of that. Yeah, it's sticking to my hand a little bit more than I like, so I'm just going to flour that just slightly. If you flour it too much, then the seams don't seal together. There we go. Still looking a little rough. Let's just fold that up again, just like that. Now it will smooth out a little bit as it puffs up, but you know what? I'm going to try this one more time because I want it to try to be as good looking as possible. This side's a little bit stickier, so I might fold that so it seals onto itself. There we go. Now that seam I'm going to pinch together to make sure it seals up. Right, and then I'm going to kind of fold the ends up like that and pinch that together and make sure that they seal up, otherwise you'll have a crease when you go to dump out your loaf. You don't want that. Let's flip that over. It's not the prettiest, but it'll do. Okay, there's that one. I'm going to go ahead and spray my loaf pan. maybe a little extra on bottom. And we'll put it in top side first, and then we'll flip it over. So top side first, so you can see the seam right there. We're gonna make sure there's oil on that, and then we'll flip it over. All right, and then make sure that it kind of fills out the bottom of the pan, because it will want to, when it rises, it'll want to come up and not so much out. So there's that one. All right, and for this, we'll just do the classic, you know, basic bread thing, and take our plastic again. Just like that. And we'll spray some oil so that it releases nicely. And there we go. Now we're not going to seal the sides or anything. We'll just let it drape over, because when it comes up, that plastic is going to want to slide and take up some slack. So just make sure that's nice and loose, and it's got some oil on the sides, and even give it a little bit of extra stuff if you want there. So we'll let that rise for a little while. Okay, it's been about an hour, and you can see the dough has risen a little bit. I'm going to check and see if it's done proofing by pushing into the dough with my finger about a ½ inch, and it should spring back only a little, but still leave a little dent if it's done. And you can see if I push it, it's springing back a little more than it should. Let's try it over here. So it's springing back almost all the way, which means it's not quite done yet. So we're going to leave it for, you know, maybe 15, 20 more minutes. Okay, it's been about 20 more minutes. Let's check our dough. I'm going to just poke it, and it's bouncing back, but not quite all the way. Yeah, it's springing back most of the way though, but I'm going to go ahead and start our oven preheating to 400 degrees because I think we're just about there. Okay, here we are, all puffed up and ready to go. I'm going to carefully remove our little plastic topper, and it shouldn't stick because we oiled it. So that's fantastic. Okay. So both of those are going in the oven, 400 degrees for 28 minutes. All right, timer went off. Let's see what we got. All right, they look good. I'm gonna just tap them with my finger and see if they sound hollow. Yep, they sound a little bit hollow. Still a little solid. Let's just see what it looks like out of the loaf. It's a little bit on the heavier side. I think I'm going to let them go for maybe another 2 minutes or so. All right, been a couple more minutes. Let's get in here and take a look. So yeah, it's a little bit lighter when you tap on it. So that makes me feel a little bit better about what's going on inside it. Yeah, a little bit lighter. So some of that internal moisture has had a chance to cook off. So we'll take those out. It will continue to cook a little bit as it cools. And we're going to make sure to take them out of the pan so that the bottom side doesn't continue to cook. So there we are. So they're both pretty hot right now. They're both nice and light. You know, there doesn't appear to be a whole lot of moisture in there. If you tap on them, they have like a nice light kind of, they call it a hollow sound. but it just lets you know that it's not real doughy in there. You know, it's nice and puffed up. It's a little bit softer on the side, but you can still hear that it's, you know, it's not solid in there. So there we go. We'll let it completely cool to room temperature before we cut into it. Otherwise, it's not going to continue to cook and everything inside there. So that's it. So let's do it. All right. So let's just take a look inside. They've cooled down for a couple hours now. It's at room temperature. Still a little bit soft. It'll firm up over the next couple of days, but we can still slice it pretty well now. So we'll just cut into that and take a look. All right. So we got a nice soft crumb here. With the crust is still pretty chewy. Yeah, makes it good. It's a good sandwich bread. It's sturdy enough to slice thin and, you know, hold whatever you want to put on it. And it turned out pretty good. The flavor could be a little bit better. That's where the fridge fermentation comes in. But you know, for a sandwich bread, that's what we want.